Wanted to share with you this morning a little story about our friends at Tint Lady. And I know people are noticing that the days are getting longer when it comes to the amount of available sunshine. Of course, window tints are great. They can prevent the ultraviolet light from coming through and bleaching various things you've got inside your furniture, carpets, drapes, some of your valuables too. It can do a job, and I've witnessed that myself. But it can also, when we get into the longer periods of sunshine, it can help keep things cool once we get back into the warmer weather inside your home, giving a break to your air conditioning unit and saving on your electric bills. Now, they do home window tinting, office window tinting. They'll do automobiles. They'll also do paint protection. Get a free estimate by calling 736-8469. You can set up an appointment, or you can go online at tintladyidaho.com. This is a company that's been in business on the local level now for almost a quarter of a century, located at 1887 Highland Avenue East in Twin Falls, open Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., although you can get a Saturday appointment. Do keep in mind, though, that the business is closed on Sundays. It's 8:45. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. So here we are, 3.5 weeks into the occupation of the Malheur Wildlife Refuge in Oregon. And as I predicted, you would see media coverage evaporate as time went on. Why? Well, media finds other stories to cover. There's a columnist who works for the Washington Post. I can't stand the fellow. His name is Dana Milbank, but he did make a great observation about a year ago. He had pointed out that media news cycles always have been short. In other words, there's a great big fire, they chase that, and then all of a sudden another fire breaks out, and they're not capable of covering both fires to the same extent. And what's happened, especially in the television age, 24-hour saturation cable news, in the television age, what we've got now, media that just goes all over a story. And, of course, for a few days, that's the big story, and to the exclusion of everything else that happens. And then another fire breaks out, and they run off, and a couple weeks later, you go, whatever happened to those guys who were camped out over at that wildlife refuge in Oregon? Well, they're still there. Milbank, the columnist, made a great observation, though. He said that we've gone from, sometimes a story lasting for 3 weeks to a month. Now the story lasts a few days, and it's just completely off the media radar. And I think that's well said. I remember in 1973, I happened to be in grade school still at the time, but I remember we had the takeover at Wounded Knee by American Indians. And it garnered attention in media for a long, long time. And if you were watching the old alphabet networks in those days, you would hear people like Walter Cronkite come on the air every night and say, "At the Wounded Knee Reservation, the occupation continues for another day." And there would be this long 3.5, 4-minute piece coming in about the demands of the people who were there and the latest news and the latest details and how the government was reacting. We don't get that much, even though, well, you can still find it. You've just got to go to the internet and you've got to do a search, and you put in Malheur or you put in Ammon Bundy, and you'll find something. 8:47. Bill Colley with you this morning on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. It's 29 right now. This morning, out of nowhere, popped up a piece at the Washington Examiner written by a fellow by the name of Brian Levin. He's also working with a guy named Kevin Grisham. They are university professors from Southern California. And they're saying it's time for these men to go, that they do not represent conservative values. And the bisexual governor of Oregon, remember, she ended up as governor because her predecessor got in some trouble and had to resign, and she was the lieutenant governor. She's married to a man, but apparently it's an open marriage, so she can practice her bisexuality. She now says she wants the federal government to move in and take out these people at the refuge. Well, she's looking for a bloodbath, isn't she? And on top of this, according to what I was just reading this morning, the meeting that was held this week in Burns, Oregon, you had Bundy and several of his associates. They've finally had someone open the doors and allow them to hold a meeting with the community, because they wanted to do this at several other locations, and the government kept saying, nope, nope, nope. Finally, one of the local schools opened its doors. And, of course, they had a conversation with the local people, some of whom said, you guys need to get out of town. Some of whom also said, we support what you guys did. We think it's a good idea, and it brought attention to the story, but now you can get out of town. And so that was the AP's focus on it. But what was interesting is Ryan Bundy actually said most of the people in that classroom where they had the public meeting Tuesday night, Ryan Bundy said yesterday, that's Ammon's brother, he said, turns out most of these people weren't telling us to leave. And in fact, if you read the AP story closely, this is your typical media perfidy. That is evil. They structured the story as if it's like, you guys got to leave our town. And Joe Smith said they had to leave town. Jenny Smith said, well, yeah, you did good work, but now you have to leave town. But nowhere in the story did it tell you how the crowd reacted overwhelmingly toward these men. And it would appear, because they haven't done anything violent, some of the people who were there did some things that were stupid. You can't drive around in the federal government's pickup trucks to go shopping at the grocery store. You'll get arrested for that. And, of course, there are hangers-on that show up for any of these types of things. The guys writing today at Washington Examiner say, according to the Anti-Defamation League's senior fellow, Mark Pitcavage, 2/3 of the squatters belong to the anti-government Patriot movement. Now, why do they say the Patriot movement is anti-government? Because I brought this up on air a couple of weeks ago. I still believe that I'll have Social Security when I retire. I've been paying a portion of my paycheck every couple of weeks for about 37 years. So I would like to see something at least come back my way. Do I expect it? Well, you know, when I was young, I thought I'd win the lottery too. But I'm still hopeful that there will be a check for me when I retire, and I still believe in that. So there are some things I still want the government doing for me. I trust the government when it snows to plow the roads. When I drive around and I see potholes, I trust the government, and I would like the government to fill those potholes. That does not mean that I am anti-government because I believe the government is heavy-handed when it comes to ranchers in the western states. And see, these are the tricks media play with us all of the time. To say that the Patriot movement is anti-government, no, the Patriot movement is anti some elements of the government. You know, when the government comes in, I had a conversation the other day about civil asset forfeiture when Grant Lobes was in the studio with us. And he said, you know, in Idaho, we would not wrongfully take something from someone. He said, if you're dealing drugs, but you're using your mother's car, we'll give your mother's car back to her. But if it's your car, yes, they will take it to help offset, you know, their costs in chasing you down and arresting you and putting you in jail and all of the like. But as he pointed out, in Idaho, we do not snag people's automobiles who were not involved in the crime being committed. But you know, that happens in other parts of the country. And he was telling me in an email yesterday, he said it, you know, I'm paraphrasing, he said it was disgusting that they're doing it in places like New Mexico. If I object to someone in New Mexico, the government coming in and stealing my grandmother's car, which is essentially what it is, because grandson borrowed the car and he got in trouble without her knowledge, that does not make me anti-government. It makes me anti-heavy-handed government. This is what we're talking about in these situations. And as I brought it up before, if the President of the United States would pardon both Dwight and Steve Hammond and let them come home because of the ridiculous amount of time they were forced to serve after their convictions, then this would all go away. If he showed good faith, then Bundy and his followers could leave. And instead of throwing Bundy and his followers in jail for 20 years and antagonizing more red-blooded Americans, cut a deal with Bundy and his followers and say, look, if you leave nicely, all right, you'll have to pay a fine, but we're not going to make you die in a federal prison. 8:53, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. 29 right now, 736-0300, our telephone number, and you're on the air.
Good morning, Bill. You know, something was brought up just the other day. It fits perfectly in this. None of us are anti-totally government. Government has its place in the Constitution. Government cannot be totally eliminated or chaos would ensue. But this falls just in line with that Second Amendment deal. On the First Amendment, why don't we register these reporters and stuff? And when they miscue stuff or purposely misinform us, punish them. I mean, what's the difference? We can go back and prove that stuff that the media has misinformed that is directly involved in a lot of this police action problems. burning of buildings, cops getting shot, and so on and so forth. But where's the outrage for that? But if a criminal shoots somebody, they want to take my gun.
And thank you for the call. I got a follow up to that, and I think he touched on something that I should add to this. Media loved the Occupy demonstrators. Media hated the Tea Party. I went to some of those giant Tea Party rallies in Washington, and we picked up all of our garbage and took it with us. On the other hand, when I went to the Glenn Beck rally there in 2010, we also picked up all of our garbage and took it with us. But then you had the Al Sharpton rally, the counter demonstration, and those pigs went down to the World War II monument, and they left all of their garbage all over that sacred space. They desecrated that monument to the heroes who saved civilization, to the greatest generation. And yet the media failed to cover that. The media gave these people credit for being out there showing us the what for. Although someone in media did say that the Beck rally resembled a giant church picnic. Occasionally some truth will come out of something like this. It's just that they refuse. They promote Black Lives Matter. They promote Ferguson, Missouri. Media was party to the lie. Hands up, don't shoot. Baloney. It never happened. And yet, you've got a bunch of guys sitting out in the middle of the high desert, not bothering anyone, even the dingaling who drove the government truck down to the grocery store. Other than that, there's been no victims in these crimes. Nobody's been hurt. And yet government is now cheerleading the bisexual, or rather government, media cheerleading the bisexual governor of Oregon who wants someone to go in and have a bloodbath at that refuge. And then what'll happen? If you go in there, and I brought it up on the show a few weeks ago, in 1916, a group of Irish revolutionaries seized the main post office and government buildings in downtown Dublin. The British came in with machine guns and cannons and drove them out. And eventually, a large share of those Irish revolutionaries surrendered alive. The British then began a campaign of executing them. Yes, taking them out, tying them to stakes in prison yards, and shooting them dead. Up until that point, most Irish people supported the English in putting down these guys who had caused such a ruckus in downtown Dublin. But then when the English started shooting them dead, Ireland exploded. And Ireland is still afire, if you look at it in that sense. It's a little calmer now than it was 20 years ago, but it kicked off 70 years, almost 80 years of civil war. You seriously think that if federal agents go in there guns a-blazing and spatter Bundy's blood and all of his associates' blood all over that refuge, that will quiet a patriot movement? You're nuts. But it would satisfy the bloodlust of liberals and communists and socialists. Those are the real anti-American haters right there. They're the people who think burning flags is okay. They're the people who think that they can throw a flag on the ground, walk on it, urinate on it, and then set it afire. And they claim that Bundy and his crowd are somehow bad guys because they're doing this. Well, okay. I'll agree. They perhaps are not the type of people you'd want always over at your home for dinner. But at the moment, they haven't harmed anyone. And all you've got going right now, these so-called progressives, are trying to enshrine their French Revolution where they go out and lop the heads off of everyone they don't like and everyone that disagrees with them. We've got to stop them. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. We've got an hour of the program still ahead. I hope you can stick around. News is coming up next from Fox. I'll share with you in the next hour what's going on in the national political front, as we still have people, of course, who haven't figured out that Donald Trump and Ted Cruz are attracting voters because they're sticking their fingers directly into the eyes of the dingbats and criminals who run this country. More on that on the way. Also, one liberal U.S. senator, she's about 4 feet high. She'd probably get along very well, we should point out, too. Hint, hint, with the governor of Oregon. One liberal U.S. senator said we shouldn't let the Constitution get in the way of President Obama's gun grab, his executive orders. Yeah, what a group of sweethearts they are.